since we're on darkness,
Yeah.
we have to talk something about dying and death, because two of the most beautiful stories in this collection, Dying and Last Days in Darwin, are two of the most striking and beautiful stories. And since you are alive and healthy sitting in front of us and have clearly not experienced death from the inside, you write about it so incredibly well, strikingly well. If you could talk a little bit about that, how you pulled that off.
I'm a hypochondriac, so I've imagined my death many times.
You put all of those things to great use, Bindy, I have to say.
Yeah. No, actually 10 years ago I was incredibly sick, and could have died. And I had a congenital heart problem, which I didn't realise I had. So that made me aware, and we all know we're going to die, but that really put me in that understanding more. So that illness certainly helped with those stories. So understanding is that when you're sick, the distance between the ill and the dying is so great between the people that are left behind, the well. And I think the dying story was very much about when someone is quite sick, your world shrinks. Your life shrinks physically. You're stuck in a house, you're stuck in a room, you're stuck in a bed, and the world goes on. Christmases continue to go on without you, and children will have birthdays without you. So I think my kids were quite young. Martha's here today, but when I was sick, so I was very aware of that, the pain of leaving your children behind. And then of course the other dying story is about my mum, loosely based on my mum's death. So and she had a beautiful death. So I was actually there when she died, so that helped in my understanding of death. Passing into another part of your life. The spirit leaving, and I think that is not not that devastating. It actually is a beautiful thing, and I don't know. I'm a person of faith, so I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of pain, but not of death. So, yeah.
Well, your answer, I'm sure, is right, through your own experience and everything, but I have to add an element that you can't or will not add, and that is, there was a writer who once said about nonfiction that you don't get credit for living. In other words, you could have a really very interesting life to write about, but that isn't going to make a good story necessarily. And so having had two traumatic experiences doesn't mean that you would produce good work from it. So what I can say that you can't is that you've turned that into beautiful art. So somehow and I think the closest you touched on it was giving us that image of the world gets smaller and smaller. And so if a writer can think from inside that very small place, that's giving a richness that somebody on the outside won't understand. And maybe that touches on very clearly how you pulled those stories off so beautifully. So thank you. They're scary, but they're not actually.
Yeah,
they're beautiful stories. You don't have to be afraid to read them.